都很难读，有读的都是。
Great to see you here today, making a really strong presence and making your voices heard at this visit from the Chinese Premier. We thank you for gathering here today to bear witness, to stand up for important values of democracy and freedom. Because we stand here on the lawns of Parliament House, we do embrace those fundamental values of freedom of speech, democracy and human rights. These values are the cornerstone of our society and they must be defended not only here in Australia but across the globe. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, it is not enough to be compassionate, you must act. And those are incredibly wise words, and words that you all, by being here today, really reflect that sentiment from the Dalai Lama of not just being bystanders, but actually standing up, raising your voices and demanding a better world. And I thank you for being here, for being part of that. For all those of you who've come out to protest today, we raise our voices for those who cannot. We are here to highlight the injustices and human rights abuses which are put forward in the name of the Chinese government and which Prime Minister Anthony Albanese must take up with the Chinese Premier when he meets with him as part of his visit. The Australian government cannot be a bystander. The Australian government needs to raise its voice as well, just as you all are today by being here. The Greens stand in solidarity with the Tibetan people, whose culture and identity has long been under threat. We stand with the Uyghur community who face severe oppression and are subjected to significant atrocities. We stand with the people of Hong Kong, whose freedoms are being continually eroded. And we must amplify the voice of those in China who stand up and demand, who have the courage, they dare to demand democracy and reform. We particularly admire their courage in the face of significant threat and challenge. As the Chinese Premier visits the Australian Parliament as a guest of the government, I urge all of those who are attending those meetings to raise these issues with the Premier. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has talked about disagreeing when we must. Well, when it comes to human rights, we must disagree. We must see this visit as an opportunity to advance human rights for people who are not free to speak. We have that freedom in this country, and we must use a visit like this to be very clear about Australian values and Australian expectations of those who we deal with. We must not step away from these moments. We must take this opportunity to raise our voice and to demand these outcomes for these communities. Now, the Greens have long supported freedom for Tibet, and today again I am calling on the government of China to end the repression in Tibet and to listen to Tibetans who want the restoration of their rights and freedoms. This is a long fought campaign and one that we must not forget about. We cannot simply think this is something of the past. So to the Tibetan, Uyghur, Hong Kong and Chinese democracy activist communities who are here today, I simply want to give you this message. You are not alone. We stand with you and we demand democracy, freedom of speech and human rights. Your courage and resilience is an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
My Uyghur friends. Assalamu alaikum, hürmetli qarindoshlar. Bugün benim hayatımda ötkizgen Kurban Bayramı'nın en güzel Kurban Bayramı oldu. Çünkü ben bir yerde, çünkü benim düşmanımga karşı meşahede sizlerden birlikte ötkizdim. Bu Kurban Bayramı'nın asli beğenisi bugün meşahede durup Xitayga hey Xitay, hey kafirninki, hey Xitayninki, hey zulümninki ilgisi bulan Li Chang, yuqal gözümdün, bir yere kirişinin hakkın yok diyeligimiz bizning bayramımızın en iyisini ötkizgenligimizin ispatı. Hemmeğine rahmet. Thank you for gathering here today. Especially today, the camera is very cold because of him, maybe. My name is Bakhtiar Bora, and I stand before you as a representative of the Uyghur community. A community that has faced unimaginable hardship and injustice at the hands of the Chinese government. I came to you with a heavy heart to express my express why Chinese Premier Li Chang should not be welcome to Australia, and why business cannot proceed as usual with a regime that perpetrates genocide and the crimes against humanity. Australia has long been a big
今天李强代表他的老板习近平来拉拢澳洲和新西兰了，我们希望他们得逞吗？当然不。
So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And today, Chinese Premier is visiting Australia and New Zealand. So, his purpose is obvious: trying to use trade and interest to compromise our government. Can we let them have their way? Of course, no.
澳洲政府想稳定双边关系，恢复贸易，我们理解这一点，但不应该支持这一点。为什么？因为归根结底，西方与中国的所有贸易，在某种程度上就是在给中共输血，同时也是在给俄罗斯输血，给世界上所有专制集权国家输血。
So we know that our Australian government trying to stabilize the relationship, resume the trade with China. This is understandable, but this shouldn't be compromise the fundamental values, because the trade and the economy development, the money to Chinese Communist Party is actually giving blood to other dictatorship around the world, like Russians and other dictator regime around the world.
这加强了他们的财政，巩固了他们的政权，从而加重了世界各地的人权灾难。
Because all this trade and money to the Chinese government regime is going to actually strengthen their power and also strengthen other dictatorship they've been supporting and work with.
西方与中国这样的国家密切往来所带来的种种危害，根本不是在对话桌边顺口提几句人权就能抵消的。
So all this trade relationship of China with Australia and other Western countries has been undermining human rights and other fundamental value of Western country. So this kind of damage. It's not something can be fixed with some small talk over the human rights dialogue.
那些所谓的友好往来，就是在慢性自杀。
So all these friendly talk and
hear us that need to take action. So please listen up. I'm not going to repeat anything anyone said today. You've all heard it. What I am going to say is, just now I spoke to one of the Uyghur women here who came and she cried. She said she heard yesterday that 3 of her closest friends' bodies, dead bodies, were taken and given back to the families after they spent some time in the concentration camps. This is the situation. Do not believe the propaganda. Do not believe the panda propaganda that we saw in South Australia yesterday. Yesterday we saw a strong crowd of Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Tibetans and the Falun Gong practitioners in front of the zoo, Australia's Adelaide Zoo, to make sure that the Li Chang sees and hears that there is a huge group of activists, huge group of freedom fighters in this country who will not settle for anything less. The message doesn't only go for Li Chang, the message doesn't only go for the Chinese Communist regime, the message must go to our government, because our government is the one that can make a difference now. We are Australian citizens, we are living in this land, and we know what freedom is. They do not. They know what money is, and that's all that is to them. For us, it is our family, it is our country, it is our heritage, and it is our culture. So make sure that you stand strong. Look at the numbers numbers that are waning and look at our numbers that are standing strong. We've been here since 7:30, I'm told, some of us, and we will stand here and keep raising our voices. Now, China is killing not only Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, destroying democracy, harvesting organs of the Falun Gong people. China is killing scholarcide. They are killing, imprisoning scholars, academics, people who teach our next generation of Uyghurs, our next generation of Tibetans. These people are being taken away. The next generation of children, million Uyghurs, a million Tibetans have been taken into concentration camps to make sure that they do not grow up with their own identity and culture. This is the situation in the 21st century. And here we have the Australian government rolling out the red carpet to Wang Yi earlier, a couple of months ago, and now to Li Chang. Now we've heard in the news that Xi Jinping is coming end of the year. So we need to stay strong. We need to grow our numbers, and we need to make sure that our parliament members, our local members speak up for us. Don't just come to protests and disappear. Make sure you go and talk to your federal member, your state member, and your local member. Get in touch, network, so that we are stronger next time we come here. Panda policy is not enough. Panda policy means that, like what Li Chang said in his statement before he came to Australia yesterday, that we must trade and we must shelve our differences. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen, shelving our differences? Does that mean that the Tibetan community, the Uyghur community gets shelved?
Representative to joining us. It's good to have our government representative to show their support and concerns for human rights. So we all come here with different, probably spiritual belief, different political belief, which is fine. That doesn't stop us from working together in solidarity, because we have some common value and common belief to share together, right? Which is that human rights and freedom should be respected. No one should be persecuted for their political belief or spiritual belief. So humanities and human life and freedom should be respected and valued. That's why we're coming here. And we're here because we're concerned about the persecution and human rights violations still happening in China under the Chinese Communist ruling. And we are also concerned that when the Chinese premium is coming to Australia, the trade is talked, the human rights shouldn't be forgotten and should be actually bring up to the Chinese leader and Chinese delegation whenever they meet with our Australian government and Australian representative. Because we believe
Chinese government will block them and will charge them. Anyway, because the Communist Party, Communist region is evil and rogue region, it can never be trusted. The organization I present today is the Chinese Alliance for Democracy. The founder of the organization, Dr. Wang Bingzhang, established the overseas Chinese democratic movement in 1983, but he was kidnapped by Chinese government in 2002 from Vietnam, not in China, but from Vietnam, into the China and jailed for the sentenced for life. And also another my friend of mine, he is Sweden citizen and writer and publisher, owned the workshop in Hong Kong, and because he published some book doesn't like by Xi Jinping, and he was kidnapped from Thailand in 2015. So this is really the rogue state. They do every evil things, and never can be trusted. And all of us should remember what happened in 4.5 years ago, 2020. On the New Year Day of 2020, 8 doctors.
And I guess in terms of, and whilst I'm wearing the Tibetan flag, I don't want to forget also all other other communities right across the region too, including the Uyghurs as well too, and those who practice other faiths. But thank you again for the immense courage that you show in coming out here. I know that the challenges associated with that. You're doing a great job, and we're with you. Those in your families are families back home as well too. That we believe that all humanity should have the right to participate equally across their communities, whether that be through faith, whether that be through the practice of language and culture, the capacity to engage politically, the capacity just to participate fully in your communities. I had the immense privilege of travelling to Dharamshala earlier this year to meet with His Holiness, but also to meet with some recent sort of refugees who had made their way across the border, to hear firsthand the human rights challenges that we have in Tibet. And I just want to make it very clear that there are voices here across all political parties that support the immense good work that you're doing to ensure that human rights that we should all expect to be able to practice are ones that we won't be silenced on here in Canberra and here right across the Tibetan diaspora. Thank you very much.
Nothing much there. The number of flags that are flying high here outnumbers the flag over there. We have more Tibetan flags raising high against them. We have Hong Kong flags raising. We have Uyghur flags raising. So we are much more stronger right now here than them. Because they came here just for one purpose, to show the good image. But we came here to show the truth. And the truth is much more powerful than a good image. Good image stands nothing against truth. We are here today gathering for the freedom of Tibetan people, gathering for the freedom of our Hong Kong brothers, because we have seen what is happening in Hong Kong, because we are seeing what is happening in East Turkestan, and we know what is happening inside Tibet. I was born in Tibet, many of us are born in Tibet. Our fathers have been in prison, our grandfathers have been in prison, they passed away, some of them in prison. So we have the feel of what it means to be losing somebody from our own family. Not because they passed away naturally, but because they have been imprisoned, they have been incarcerated, they have been made to suffer. So one thing I can tell to the Chinese leadership here is, wherever you go, wherever you step your foot, there will be us. There will be Hong Kong people coming against you, there will be Uyghur people coming against you, and there will always be Tibetans coming against you. Because you have invaded our land, but you fail to invade our heart and our mind. You will never invade our hearts, our minds, our spirit. There is no death to the spirit of Tibetan people. There is no death to the spirit of Hong Kong people, and there is no death to the spirit of Uyghur people. We are all one in this war. Our war is against the Communist Party of China.
Of the Australian Hong Kong community and speaking here. Let me speak a few Cantonese. That is our mother language. 香港朋友，我哋一齊嗌好唔好啊？光復香港，時代革命 ，Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of the time. Human rights are not for trade.
Human rights are not for trade.
Li Chang, you are not welcome here. In 2019, millions of Hong Kong citizens took to the streets in peaceful protests during the anti-extraditional movement, only to be met with violent repression from the CCP. Over 10,000 people were arrested, with more than 2,000 currently in prisons under the political charge. Over 7,000 more face uncertain futures as they awaiting potential prosecution. Amongst those arrested are pro-democracy activists, journalists, lawyers, pilots, doctors, nurses, One of them is an Australian citizen named Gordon has been convicted of subversion and facing 10 years to life imprisonment. I stand here today and ask, what has the Australian government done to rescue those citizens? Human rights are not for trade. Freedoms is not for trade. Justice is not for trade. I urge the Australian government to speak out for yours.
I want to say a huge thank you all for coming today. It's so important that we're here today. It's important for all of us who stand in solidarity with Tibetans, with Uyghurs, with the Hong Kongers, Chinese democracy protesters, the Falun Dafa and others. Today is just a small glimpse of what it's like for our brothers and sisters in China who are facing down these threats, intimidation and violence every day in China. My heart goes out to them, those brave people who stand up to the massive, violent, oppressive Chinese communist regime. Can you imagine staring down police officers in China hell-bent on your arrest and torture? Can you imagine, as so many have done, standing alone in Tibet and the Uyghurs and Hong Kongers against the might of the Chinese police? We're here today to tell them that they're not alone and they're not forgotten. We know their struggle and we stand with them today and every day. Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Uyghurs!
Free Uyghur!
Free Uyghurs!
Free Uyghur!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free Hong Kong!
Free China!
Free China!
Free China!
Free China!
However, the Australian government is letting us down. The Australian government is allowing China to set the agenda for the Australia-China relationship. They're falling into the panda diplomacy trap of being soft on China when China is not soft on anyone else. Not Australia, not the people in the South China Sea, and not people within China. The Australian government needs to prove that they are truly committed to human rights. Their failure to hold China to account is equal to complicity in China's crimes. How can they say they are concerned about China's human rights violations in Tibet when they have not yet issued Magnitsky sanctions against any CCP official for their human rights violations? How can they ask us to believe that the Foreign Minister or the Prime Minister is concerned about human rights in Tibet, as they claim, when they allow the Chinese Communist Party's officials to act with impunity and to fail to hold them to true account for their human rights violations in Tibet? There's been a level of secrecy attached to the visit of Li Shang that has both surprised and disappointed me. We can only conclude that the Australian government is attempting to protect Chinese leaders such as Wi Shiquan from our criticism of their human rights record. We cannot be silenced. We shouldn't be silenced. Why would the Australian government feel the need to be the custodians of silence for the CCP? Why would anyone wish to protect Chinese leadership from the free speech of us, Australian citizens here? The Tibetan community in Australia has a high percentage of former political prisoners, Tibetans who've been imprisoned for protesting and defying the Chinese government. In prison, they face torture at the hands of Chinese police. These Tibetans have escaped Tibet and are now enjoying the freedom here in Australia, which we cherish, and is a place where free speech is valued and protected. So we ask again, why is the Australian government not transparent with us about the details of Li Shang's visit? We hope it's not to shield Li Shang from our protest and not to try to silence us from our valid criticism of China's human rights records in Tibet. Furthermore, even though Tibetans are now in Australia, China has ensured by means of transnational repression that many Tibetans can never feel truly free. Sadly, for many Tibetans here
one purpose, and that is to ensure that this event goes smoothly. I have had a long relationship with this ACT police and the AFP, and we have always, as a community, tried our best to engage in peaceful, proper, legal protest. And I am deeply disappointed that the ACT police have again, like they did in the 08 Olympics, chosen to prioritise the political purpose for today, rather than protect the rights and the safety of the Canberra community. So we will be making this known to the Minister, that we will be documenting we have documented every case of abuse, of intimidation. Because what happened is we told the ACT police weeks ago that we knew this busload of thugs were coming, and they said that they would protect us. That's what they told us to our face. And then when we were getting beaten up and abused and intimidated, they did nothing. They said, I'm sorry, we're too busy. So it's not good enough, and I'll tell you why. Because this is what happens when you allow the Chinese Communist Party to come and to set the agenda. This is the disgusting, insidious influence of doing business with the Chinese, is that it pollutes Australia's politics, it pollutes our institutions, it pollutes our government. And that's what you get. You get scenes like this on Australian streets, scenes of intimidation, of undermining our democracy, of trampling on our rights, like they do in East Turkestan, like they do in Tibet, like they do in Hong Kong. John said it perfectly. Might is right. That's all they know. They think if they drum loud enough and drown us out that we won't be heard. But we will be heard. We will never be silent. So now, I would now like to welcome one of the Tibetan people's greatest allies, the greatest ally that we have in Australia, Dr. Zoe Bedford from the Australia Tibet community, our voice and our champion. So please give Dr. Zoe Bedford a big welcome.
Hello.
Women and other people who are being abused and put into camps. So really thank you for coming today. It means a lot to us. I'd now like to invite another representative of another community who's been really impacted in the most almost unimaginable and horrific ways. I'm sure you're all familiar with the way that the Falun Dafa and the Falun Gong have been persecuted. And so it really is my pleasure to welcome John Della from the Falun Dafa Association of Australia. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much for organising for me to speak today, and it's wonderful actually to see Tibetans, Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, Hong Kongers, other people who are persecuted by the Chinese Communist regime to be here together with a common voice. Now, you'll find that Falun Gong practitioners are over there doing meditative exercises, so please don't think that that means their heart is not with all of you. It's just that we have a particular way of focusing energy through meditation to help dissolve things in around us, to make a more positive environment, which is helping today, I believe. Now look, most of you were here yesterday or this morning down around the hotel, and you've been in the streets, you're holding flags, and even though the police try their best, as they describe it, to maintain order and keep people off the road, the communist group organised by the embassy and the consulate still can interfere with our banners. Now, I was holding a banner this morning, it was pulled down and red flags placed in front of it as the motorcade came past. And I don't think that's what we should expect. Now, in Australia, we should have the freedom to express ourselves like we are now, but the freedom to express ourselves so a visiting dignitary from China, like Li Cheng, the Premier, sees our messages. He should not be protected from seeing the suffering that his communist regime has inflicted upon all the communities here today. That is the responsibility of the Chinese communist regime. So we're all together in that sense of having one persecutor. But if you think back, I'd really like to talk to those Chinese people, but they make such a noise to drown us out because they don't want to hear, which is actually reflective of the Chinese Communist Party. They don't want to hear from us at all. It's inconvenient because since 1951 they take over Tibet and then they take over East Turkestan. It is not fair, it is not reasonable, it's unjust, and they will not accept that or face it because they're used to might is right. Just as the rallies we're suffering today and yesterday, they impose themselves on other people, innocent people. And that sort of imposing culture is a communist culture. It's not Chinese. Now, a lot of those Chinese people are probably, might be a bit dumb, but they're also kind of innocent because they get pushed around. They get paid to come here and paid to hold flags and pull our flags down. but a lot of them are probably still good people if you can find their heart, if you can touch their heart. And that's part of what we try and do as Falun Gong practitioners, to remind the Chinese people that they have a culture which is founded in traditional Chinese spiritual principles, Buddhism and Taoism, the teachings of Confucianism, and this is what Falun Dafa brings to life. Zhen Shan Ren, truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. It doesn't mean we don't stand up just because we practice compassion, that we be truthful and we be forbearance, we will endure, and we will continue.
Leadership in human rights issues in international stage. And lastly, Australia can send a strong message to China that the world is watching and such human rights violations will not be tolerated forever. Freedom for Uyghurs! Freedom for Uyghurs! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong! China stop genocide!
China stop genocide!
China stop genocide!
China stop genocide!
Justice for Uyghurs!
Justice for Uyghurs!
Justice for Tibet!
Justice for Tibet!
Shame on China!
Shame on China!
Shame on CCP!
Shame on CCP!
Human rights not for sale!
Human rights not for sale!
Justice must prevail!
Justice must prevail!
Human rights not for sale!
Human rights not for sale!
Justice must prevail!
Justice must prevail!
China, China, hero call! Justice for Uyghurs! Justice for all!
Justice for Uyghurs! Justice for all!
China, China, hear our call!
China, China, hear our call!
Justice for Tibet! Justice for all!
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 Justice for Uyghurs! Justice for all of us!
Justice for Uyghurs! Justice for all us!
Thank you.
Overwhelmingly overshadowed human rights. So a real rapprochement with China can only take place when we can see real concrete results from these meetings. And of course we have talked about the need for an immediate release of Dr. Yang Hangzhen, for the reunion of the Uyghur families with their Australian citizens here in Australia. We have talked about the boarding school, colonial boarding school system in Tibet, which Australia knows very well as a historic mistake, and call for unfettered, meaningful access to Tibet, and for the release of all the political prisoners under the draconian laws in Hong Kong, and for democracy, and that is committing crimes against humanity and breaking all manners of international law. And this is what they are doing right now. Imagine the same government rolling out the red carpet to Russia's Putin and Israel's Netanyahu. They'll be outraged, right? Australians who believe in freedom and justice and peace would be outraged if Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin are today welcomed in this building. But they are doing this to China. They are rolling out the red carpet to China. So where is the outrage? Where is the outrage when a dictator, someone who represents a genocidal regime, is being welcomed in this building behind us? Instead, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a global icon of peace and compassion, and when the Sikong, the elected leader of the Tibetan government in exile, came to Australia with a message of peace and hope, these Australian leaders were avoiding them. Shame on them!
Shame on them!
They were running away from His Holiness the Dalai Lama while welcoming a dictator today. Shame on them!
Shame on them!
Prime Minister Penny Wong, the foreign minister, she said, dialogue with China is good, Fair enough. Tibetans know about dialogue with China more than anyone, better than anyone else here. But where is the dialogue with Tibet? So next time when the leader of the Tibetan government in exile is here, when His Holiness Dalai Lama is here, we must ensure that they are welcome. They receive the same welcome in their office and hear their message of peace and hope. Australia hasn't really done much, has done nothing really to end China's human rights abuses in Tibet, to help end China's illegal and immoral invasion, illegal military occupation of Tibet for all these 70 years. Australian leaders are quite comfortable talking about Russia's invasion of Tibet, but they refuse to talk about Tibet's invasion.
Are protesting on the left-hand side. I wonder if Australia does not wake up, take precautions, what would happen in the future? We oppose the visit of the Chinese premier because it symbolizes the potential normalization of relations with a regime, the normalization of relations with a communist regime that continues to commit human rights abuses against Uyghurs, Tibet, Hong Kong, and Mongolians. By doing this protest, our aim is to raise awareness and urge the Australian government to prioritize human rights over economic interests. Australia must be cautious when dealing with relations with China. This is because China's ongoing human rights violations and its use of economic coercion as a means of exerting influence on Australia and the rest of the world. While economic cooperation can be important, it should not come at the expense.
I make a big apologize for my fellow Chinese out there. They are communist thugs. They are communist thugs.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. On behalf of the Australian and New Zealand Alliance for the victims of the Chinese communist regime, I have 3 points to make today. First of all, we rally to send a strong message to the Australian government, ask them to get the priority right, ask them the better way to deal with the thuggish regime of the Chinese Communist Party. In his arrival statement, dictator Li Qiang, the puppet of dictator Xi Jinping, made a statement asking Australia to solve the difference That is absurd and unacceptable. This kind of ask to sell the difference reflect the bankruptcy, moral and ideological bankruptcy of the communist regime. They have nothing to say. They want to silence everyone, so they want to put the difference away. But the difference between Australia as a multicultural democracy and the totalitarian dictatorship of China is too big to be ignored, too big to serve. We have to educate the Australian government to maintain our difference and tell the world about the difference between dictatorship and democracy, between oppression and freedom. The decent people living in the liberal democracy of Australia. We Australians cannot put commercial certain interest before human rights and other Australian values. We ask Australian government and public to then form for our core values against communist tyranny. One particular urgent matter is that the Australian government should make the release of Dr. Yang Hongqun as the top priority. Dr. Yang is critically ill due to the torture and harsh condition of the detention for more than 5 years in China. And the Australian government should also make direct demand from the Chinese counterpart to release Yang Hongqun and other prisoners of conscience and political prisoners.
Thank you everyone for showing up. Amnesty International Australia stands in solidarity with the Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and Chinese democracy activists in your fight for advocacy. Amnesty had written to the Australian government ahead of Premier Lee Chang's visit, and I will read out a short summary of the letter that was sent to the government. It's an urgent call to put human rights before trade in meetings with Premier Lee. We call on the Australian government to go beyond mere expressions of concern and seek concrete commitments for tangible improvements, while clearly communicating to the Australian government and to seek accountability if these commitments are not met. Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and Chinese democracy activists rightly fear that renewed trade and economic ties are key agenda of the issues. And this concern.
We are here to be the voice of morality, to be the voice of justice, because the Australian government is not. Shame!
Shame!
This Prime Minister and this Foreign Minister is selling Australia's principles and values, and also importantly, our national interest for a more convenient trade relationship. Shame!
Shame!
Human rights are not for sale. Human rights are not for sale.
Yes!
It is not in our interests to be silent on human rights and democracy. We have tried that with the Chinese regime. Ever since Bill Clinton gave China most favored nation status back in the 90s, we have been led to believe that trading with China, that saying nothing on human rights would slowly and gradually create a liberal democracy in China. We can see from the mob over there that they have no appreciation for democracy. They have no appreciation for freedom of speech. We've seen them bully and try to drown out our protests, but will we be silenced?
No!
Our our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister have a slogan that they will work with the Chinese where they can, disagree where they must, and always act in our national interest. Well, Li Shang has said that the reason that the relationship is going so well is because Australia has shelved its differences. You know what that means? That the Australian government has decided to be silent on the issues most important in this relationship, which are human rights.
아니 정말 안 해도 들으셔야 당한 저 드링데 좀 거야디 니딱 간데 책임에 따나 맞수 챙겨야 된다 정말 디 망부 소소 디지는 게 망부 쉬금에 아니 따단다 나라 좀 탑수디 덴바 심바 좀바 배샤된 레줘다 나도 쉬고야 야말 가서 호파요 가서 쉽대요 가서 담대요 제가 가서 나는 생시 차요 말에 가서 펌들이 나야 돼 딱 미리치 말에 자망의 섬니 사이 아주니 레주 미리치리 되나 손장 나도 청하노기 생시 반이 다도 문뜬다 가서 미리큰 탑수대 쏘고야 돼 백가시 버렸어 되나 손장 드린데 가서 산이 마보니 마보친 좀 샤다나 신이 다다가 주 유거 땅 아니 타완 땅 흥노 근데 가서 좀 마보치 패샤 아니 디치도 나랑 주 처마로 다 못해 직 벨라라가고 여러 뭐치 벨라 패야 디
million Australian-born Chinese in Australia. The crowd over there do not represent them. They are bussed in and they are paid. They're not here because they believe in something. They're here because they're made to be here. We're here because we believe in freedom. Yes! We believe in democracy. Yes! We believe in justice. Yes! We are here because we speak up for those that cannot. We are here to be the voice for the voiceless. They are the voice of repression. They are the voice of intimidation. Yes! Will we be silenced? No! Will we ever give up? No! I'm so proud to see so many Tibetans have travelled from as far as wide as Newcastle and Sydney and Nowra and Wagga Wagga. This is a testament to our dedication and our passion and our commitment to our cause and to each other. That's what we're here for. And I'm so glad to see we're joined here today by our Uyghur brothers and sisters who have again travelled from as far and wide as Sydney and Adelaide and across the country. And of course our Hong Kong friends are here and our Chinese democracy friends are here. And we are an alliance not against China, we are an alliance for human rights. We are an alliance for dignity. We are an alliance of justice and freedom of speech. That's what we stand for, and we stand together. And we will never, ever, ever give up on each other. On behalf of the ACT Tibetan community and the Tibetan National Community Association,